I'm Blair. It's no surprise that homelessness will be one of the big topics in local elections this year. We want to hear how the candidates running for Portland mayor will address the problem. I sat down with the top candidates. 3 of them are currently on city council. Here's how they say they would address the homeless crisis if elected.
Improving, but still troubled.
As a longtime Portlander, city commissioner and mayoral candidate Mingus Mapps can't say he's proud of what Portland has become.
If we don't get better fast, the city could fail. This is an inflection point for Portland.
On your campaign website, it says, "I have a vision to make Portland the best run city in the United States." What is that vision?
Oh, great. Well, this is a unique opportunity and moment in the history of Portland. One of the things that will happen on January 1st, 2025 is that we'll have a new form of government. One of the things that we have to do is, all 24 bureaus within the city have to be synced up and working and pulling in the same direction. And that historically has not been the way Portland operates. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why downtown Portland in particular looks the way it does.
So under your leadership, if elected, will people still be sleeping on the sidewalks?
We're going to see, every year we're going to see fewer and fewer people sleeping on the sidewalks. This problem has exploded over the last several years. The metric I'm committed to holding myself accountable to is seeing the absolute number of people who are sleeping on our sidewalks decrease over time. I'd like to see it shrink by at least half in our first 4 years. And I know a lot of people will be skeptical of that. I will tell you that's actually achievable.
So you talk about continuing to remove camps.
Yep.
But what about a place for them to go?
Absolutely. Well, this is an important thing. We've got 6,000 people sleeping on the streets, probably in about 1,000 camps. Right now, the city is probably moving about 500 camps a month. And every time we go out to a camp or to an RV, we let folks know, listen, you need to move here. We try to connect them with services.
Even though services are limited, he points to the city-led tiny home villages as part of the solution. He wants to make that program a county responsibility.
One of the conversations that the next mayor needs to have is to make sure that the county takes over this work so that, I and future commissioners on council can focus in on parks and roads and delivering safe water and keeping our rivers clean.
And is it really just financial reasons that you'd want the county to take all of that over?
Well, number one, this is really appropriately their work. The city does the things that are on the names of our bureaus: parks, water, cops, fire. Human services really isn't part of our portfolio. In the last couple of years, we've gotten into that work, frankly, because the county has struggled so much. That's bad government. And frankly, we're not really well equipped for this. And we don't have the funding for it. One of the reasons why we are in this economic challenge is that we are investing tens of millions of dollars in houseless services that, frankly, the county should be providing. And I'd be happy to do that if there was need out there, which there is, or if the county were broke. But the county's not broke. The county is sitting on hundreds of millions of unspent dollars that should be serving this population. They need to get those dollars out the door.
And we've heard this rhetoric before. Do you really think you can get through to the current leadership at the county?
Well, I actually am optimistic. Right now, one of the things to remember is that elections matter, and I believe pretty much everybody over on the county board is up for election in May. So I encourage every Portlander and every Multnomah County voter to pay a lot of attention to the folks who are going to be on that ballot. Who you choose is really going to make a huge difference in what the future of the county and the city looks like. The other thing is to be fair, the current county chair has only been in that position for about a year or so. I think we all approach public work with a lot of idealism and whatnot, and then your idealism meets reality, and you need to adjust. I see the county adjusting here. I do think there are some core differences in our worldviews that explain why the county chair behaves differently and makes different choices than I would make. At the same time, I do see an overlap in our core goals.
And just lastly here, what do you have to say about people who have just completely lost faith in our local government?
I hear you, and I'll tell you, elections matter. We have to make some choices about what our future is going to look like. If we stick with the status quo and allow folks to, frankly, die in our streets by the hundreds every year, Portland will be a ghost town. Detroit will be our future. That does not need to be our future. Frankly, I believe that Portland is one of the best cities in North America. We've came through some challenges, but we can be in the lead again, and I'm deeply committed to making sure that we get there.
The policies and politics from last year are failing.
Mayoral candidate Keith Wilson is a longtime Portlander and CEO of a local trucking business. He also started the nonprofit Shelter Portland. He believes he has what it takes to revitalize what he calls a dying Rose City.
The livability is plummeting, and it has been for many, many years. And that's being shown through all of the businesses that are moving out and the population that is leaving as well. And without us able to really care for our community members in our downtown core, that migration is going to consider, and it's only going to continue to harm our city, because as those businesses leave and the community members, they leave and they take all of their jobs with them.
On your campaign website, it says you plan to end homelessness in Portland within your first year as mayor.
Right.
How do you plan to do that?
So on January 1st, the first thing I do is I'm going to promote a public safety emergency. And in so doing, we're going to immediately begin marshaling all of the private-public partnerships, whether it's churches, and as mayor, I'll have access to hundreds of facilities, whether it's community centers, and we'll start bringing that group that I've developed of experts together. Within 30 days, we'll have a plan developed, and then we're going to start standing up nighttime walk-in emergency shelters.
What will make your plan different from what's already been done?
So the plan that I'm proposing is being used not only in communities nearby like Boise, but it's being used in Philadelphia. They have mostly nighttime walk-in emergency shelters. So if there's 4,000 souls in Portland, we're going to need 4,000 beds almost overnight. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to come from outside in, but by doing so, we immediately get to enforce our codes, which are, there is no camping, no makeshift shelters.
How do you plan to open, say, 4,000 new shelter beds overnight?
So you bring the community together. As mayor, I'll have access to all of the city assets, whether it's community centers. Blair, we saw it happen just a month ago when we had our severe winter storm, right? We had 4,000 souls living on the street, and we opened up 12 facilities overnight. Each one of the shelters I'm proposing costs $0. They're existing facilities. You just repurpose at night.
Saying it'll cost $0 is somewhat ambitious. I mean, these overnight shelters will have to be staffed at some point.
Yeah, interesting you say that. So the shelter that United Gospel Mission has, that's being housed at the Church of Nazarene, where Shelter Portland's providing financial assistance, $15.55 per night per person. A Safe Rest Village costs $189 per person per night. United Gospel Mission and Church of Nazarene, with Shelter Portland's financial assistance, is sheltering and caring for people tonight at 8% of the cost of what the city is doing.
And how do you plan to approach the people that choose to live outside?
That's their sit-lie law will confirm their behavior. If they want to live on a sidewalk exposed to the elements, that's their right. But by code, they should not be in a tent.
So would you call for no more groups to hand out tents?
I would hope that that would be the case. I will, as mayor, make sure the city's not, and the county shouldn't. I mean, why would we do that?
And you keep talking of ending unsheltered homelessness, but what's to stop say you get 4,000 people off the streets, what's to stop more from following in their footsteps?
Yeah, talking to the mayor of Boise, the former mayor of Boise, he said the same thing. He thought by setting up walk-in emergency shelters, it was going to bring homelessness to the community, and he says I was completely wrong. By not providing care and allowing camping, brought people to the community. He said it was completely the opposite.
So the city can only do so much in their response to homelessness. You need to also rely on your relationship with the county.
That's right.
How do you, if elected, plan to approach that relationship with the county?
Okay, let's talk about our two different roles. The city is in charge of infrastructure, public safety, and right-of-way. And that's why we're declaring the public safety emergency. We care for our community members because 400 people are going to die this year on the street. That is a public safety emergency. That's the city. The county, they primarily focus on human services, social services, behavioral health. That's what their success is for. So now we're actually in our lanes. And so while during the day we have our day shelters, we're going to heavily rely on the county to do what they do well, which is human services, providing that linkage to drug treatment, behavioral health treatment, and other social services. Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson has been a good friend. She's always been there to help me in my projects, and I've always been there to help her in projects. I don't see that changing at all. I trust her. She's a very sharp person, but she's under pressure.
You've also said you are driven by a love for the community to deliver real change for Portland.
Absolutely.
Is a love for the community really enough to deliver the change that Portland needs?
You know, love is absolutely what I have for the community. And those individuals on the street are my high school classmates. I do the point-in-time count, the Multnomah County homeless census. Last year I ran into a high school classmate. That's love. I'm not giving up. I'm not helpless. I'm taking action, and I'm asking for every community member in Portland to join in this action, because together we can end unsheltered homelessness in a low-cost, flexible, and immediate fashion. That's love.
Better than it was 2 years ago, not nearly as clean or as safe as we'd like it.
Portland City Commissioner and mayoral candidate Renee Gonzalez sees Portland as a work in progress, especially when it comes to homelessness.
We've spent about $13 million as a city cleaning up homeless camps in the city of Portland. Sometimes it feels like whack-a-mole, but it is creating some positive environments in certain parts of the city. Secondly, we banned outdoor drug use in the city of Portland. I led that charge, and the state has recently taken that up at the state legislative level and now essentially reversed Measure 110. Overall, that's sending a message that we don't want this drug use in our city. We still see way too much of it on our streets, but every time we take a stand, it's positively impacting the environment.
So if elected, will people still be sleeping on the sidewalks?
You know, I think for the last 20 years, we've had folks running for mayor promise to end homelessness. I think in every election cycle, we'll hear someone promise to end unsheltered camping. I'm not going to promise that that's going to disappear. It has been with us for as long as the city of Portland has existed, and but it used to be much better than it is today. I will commit to return Portland to one of the cleanest, safest cities in America, and that means taking sometimes hard positions on unsanctioned camping, but never abandoning compassion.
Will you support camp removals without adequate shelter?
Yes.
Why?
One, I don't think it's either or. We're going to continue to invest in shelter.
Many people argue that your response to homelessness is too harsh. One example is calling for Portland Street Response to stop handing out tents. How do you plan, without adequate shelter, to make change in this crisis in a humane way?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is some really debilitating drug use and self-destructive behavior in certain segments of our unsheltered population. We cannot continue to feed that beast. It wasn't just tents and tarps. They stopped the distribution of drug kits.
So if elected, you'll continue to call for no more handing out tents and tarps?
Absolutely not, except for potentially in sanctioned camping sites. The broad handing out of tents and tarps by the city and county, absolutely not.
So the city can only do so much when it comes to, say, handing out tents and tarps or not doing so. How will you approach the relationship with the county? What will you do differently to fix what has been somewhat of a rocky relationship thus far?
I mean, I will say there have been shifts at the county level. They're emphasizing to a much greater extent shelter than they were a year ago. You know, it was all about housing first in the Joint Office on Homelessness. You've seen some shifts even in how they define housing first now and their willingness to support shelter. I think that's because the city increasingly had a stern voice on that, and we didn't back down. We didn't get guilted into wanting to alleviate on the street while we're all fighting for long-term housing for folks. So I think, you know, I'm proud of what I've contributed to the shift in tone from the city. The bottom line, we send $35+ million to the Joint Office on Homeless every year. I will not support continuing to send dollars there unless we see real improvements in shelter being brought online, unless we see support for Portland Street Response and for some of our other houseless outreach that the city has to pay for directly. Though we should be getting financial support from that from the Joint Office on Homelessness.
So you think the county's been enabling some of this crisis?
Yes, and I think a lot of well-intentioned nonprofits have as well.
I mean, they oversee some 200 nonprofits. How will you be the one to change the way they hold those nonprofits accountable?
We're already seeing progress in the proposed new IGA in terms of first of all, just talking about metrics, what are your actual outcomes, and are you actually going to report on how many people you're getting into shelter, or how many people in a shelter are getting into supportive housing? We have seen positive shifts in the county in the last year based on the demands from the city and frankly from the public as a whole. So I think we continue down that path, but they're not going to have our money from the city if they're not going to support the programs we're doing in direct outreach.
So let's talk about some of those programs that they help you out with, like the task sites or the Safe for Us villages. Will you continue to support those programs if elected?
Yes, I think they've shown some real progress.
If you're calling for the city to stop funding the joint office, how do you expect the county to then continue funding the city's sheltering programs?
We would stop funding if they are engaging in enabling behaviors and don't send dollars back on our city programs. Having said that, they're well supported by Metro in the supportive housing bonds, and they are struggling to get those dollars out the door. So I'm not sure they really need the city money, frankly. This is no longer a place where nonprofits and governmental entities are giving people a means to really engage in damaging behavior.
So the people who choose to live outside and say no to shelter, do you see that as a city responsibility to deal with them or a county responsibility?
I think we are law enforcement. We are first responders. So when it comes to having someone in front of your house that you don't want there anymore, there's only one government that's going to respond. That's the city. And frankly, we'd like there to be outreach workers who can get that person to move. But if they refuse to move, it's the police department that's going to be responsible ultimately for that piece. But long term, for people to rebuild their lives, that's largely a county and state responsibility in terms of behavioral health. It's very, very important the next mayor is committed to restoring the commons and isn't afraid to say that.
Is improving, but we still have our work cut out for us.
Portland City Commissioner and mayoral candidate Carmen Rubio believes the city should take on more responsibility when it comes to addressing homelessness.
We need to step up and step in and roll up our sleeves and finally piece together like a true system that works.
What about this current system in your eyes is not working?
The current system, in my opinion, is not a system. I feel like we have a collection of really great programs and efforts, but it's not knitted together in a seamless system across all jurisdictions. For a long time, the county has been doing the problems and going at it. We've had a piece of it, but not really in a way that is at a high level systemic. And I believe that what the situation calls for now, what the landscape is now, we all need to assume responsibility for this issue. And that's where I feel it's really necessary for the city as leaders. We need to lean in, not retract right now.
Because the city can only do so much when
Correct.
it comes to homelessness. They have to rely on the county and the state
Yes.
for a lot. How would you approach the relationship with the county?
So the county relationship is critical. We're interdependent. Whether people want us to be or not, that is how it's structured. So we have a responsibility to make it work. I completely reject the premise that we can take our toys and go home. We can't do that. We're leaders, we're elected to serve the public, and the public counts on us to work it out and to figure it out. That's our job. So we need to stay at the table and keep staying at the table until we work through these intractable problems, but together.
If elected, would you continue to have the city fund the county's Joint Office of Homeless Services?
Absolutely. And the reason I say that is because we do not have the ability to, like I said, take our toys and go home. We have to actually figure this out. And that those funds are our lever and our leverage to making sure that we're good partners. That together with trust and leadership.
Do you feel like the county's been using those funds appropriately?
I feel like the county is starting to be more open and more responsive, not only just to the city, but also to the public demand. So in that respect, we still have more work to be negotiated, but it is moving in a good direction.
If elected, will people still be sleeping on the sidewalks?
Probably. I mean, this is not something that's going to be solved at all overnight. It took us decades to get into a situation where we're in a crisis. It will take us a long time to get out. But my hope is for a functioning system that we have the on-ramps for people to find the supports that they need should they want to, that we have a system that's functioning and it's there and ready to receive them. I believe in shelters. I believe that we need to deal with the immediacy of the urgency on the street right now. That hasn't been a practice consistently in other places.
And how will you handle the people who choose not to go into shelter?
That is a more challenging thing. We have, obviously, we have choice. My role is to make sure that whatever we do, that it is done centered in our Portland values. So it's done with accountability and also compassion. So that's the lens that I would bring.
What does that look like on the streets, accountability and compassion?
I think it means we have the role of making sure and enforcing that the rights of way are accessible to everybody. And so that's one way that we have to be ready to use the levers that we have, but we can do so without it being a hammer.
And outreach workers is a really critical piece in
Absolutely.
all of this. And currently the city employs 6. Do you think that's enough to handle the crisis we're seeing?
I absolutely believe we have completely underfunded Portland Street Response, and I am one of those folks who really sees the value of Portland Street Response being the connective tissue of the work and the clear roles of the city and the clear roles of the county.
That's the group responding to those experiencing a nonviolent mental or behavioral health crisis.
We need to clearly commit to it at the top and give it the capacity it needs to stand on its own and demonstrate what it can do, and also be available to and accessible to all 4 corners of the city.
So do you see that outreach workers need to have more of a presence on our streets as opposed to law enforcement?
I believe that we need both. I think that it's not an either-or situation for me. I do believe that we can do multiple approaches at the same time because everybody's situation is different and every incident is very different. But I do believe in outreach workers as well with clear goals and a clear understanding of what their role and their work is.
What do you have to say to voters who have just completely lost faith in our local government's ability to handle this crisis?
I say that I hear you and I see you and I understand the frustration. I hear it every single day. I hear it in businesses that I go talk to, in community, neighborhoods, my own neighborhood, in my own family even, frustrations expressed about it. And I will say that you are right. We have not had a system that is functional and it is meeting the moment. And that's where our work is. It's unprecedented. Yes, we could not have expected it post-COVID. Yes. But is it still our responsibility to stay at the table? Yes, it is.